Isle of splendor, to all so sweet and fair. All earth surely gaze in wonder at thy gift so rich and rare. Rivers, valleys, hills, and mountains, all these gifts we do extol. All fountains, giving cheer that warms the soul. Thank you.
Thank you. And at the beginning of everything and the start of everything for us, we will have a prayer, opening prayer, done by Mrs. Lily Seraphin. Our former First Lady will be joining us.
Thank you. Can you please stand?
One more time.
Heavenly Father, we come before your holy throne at this moment in the name of your only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, our Savior, our Master, our Proprietor, our great High Priest, our Mediator, our Intercessor, our Good Shepherd, a friend who sticketh closer than a brother, who never leave us nor forsake us. We thank you, Jesus, for who you are, what you have done for us, and what you are still to do for us. We thank you for the presence of your Holy Spirit that dwells in us and upon us. We call upon you, Holy Spirit, for your divine intervention in this conference that we are having here at this moment. We thank you, Father God, for blessing our island, our country, our homeland, Dominica. We bless the airports and the seaports. We bless the people of Dominica. We bless the government of Dominica. We bless the opposition. We bless the independents, those who are neither here nor there. And we thank you, Father God, that every blessing comes from your hand. We bless this program today, and we subject our flesh under your Holy Spirit. Have your free will in this place, dear Holy Spirit. And we thank you. We give you the highest praise, the highest honor, and most of all, we give you our worship. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Mrs. Seraphin. Again, my name is Joanne Seraphin Hodge, and we have the pleasure of sitting with the former Prime Minister of Dominica, Mr. Oliver G. Seraphin. Welcome, Mr. Seraphin.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for this opportunity.
I'm very pleased to have heard the national anthem sung with such ability of a young man. I'm also pleased to announce that I was in the cabinet when we chose that song, and I'm the only living one of that cabinet of 1978 that was there when we chose the song, we chose the flag, and we chose the lyric. And of course, they said the Commonwealth of Dominica. I didn't agree. I thought we should call it Dominique, but I was outvoted. So we have the Commonwealth of Dominica. So whenever I hear the song, I feel the pleasure of having played it from the beginning.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will start. So I'm assisted by Miss Natasha Henderson, who will be coordinating and playing along, and we'll be looking along, we'll be pausing, getting some commentary, and of course questions in the end, and followed by some light refreshments. So we'll play the first part, thank you, of the documentary, and we will watch together.
My name is Joanne Seraphin Hodge, and today I have the distinct honor and privilege to speak with Mr. Oliver J. Seraphin, the former Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, a politician, hotelier, and businessman. Welcome, Mr. Seraphin.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Mr. Seraphin also is celebrating a milestone achievement of his 80th birthday this year. Mr. Seraphin, congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Before we go into our conversation today, I would like to read an article published in the Chronicle newspaper back in 2008, written by Dr. Irvin Andre, who is a judge, also a media personality and historian. To a large extent, this piece represents Mr. Seraphin's life in the political arena. Don't you agree, Mr. Seraphin?
Very much so.
Great. Oliver James Seraphin, known commonly as OJ, was born in Roseau on August 2nd, 1943. Seraphin grew up with a family in Portersville where his father, Perry, owned and operated a local store. Hardworking and a good family man, the elder Seraphin placed a high premium on education and ensured his children received an opportunity to rise above their parents' humble station. O.J. Seraphin attended the Roseau Mixed School in the late 1940s and early 1950s and later moved to Dominican Grammar School. Following his graduation in 1960, Seraphin ultimately gravitated to the insurance industry, but not before sojourns at the Carnegie Institute in the United States and in Cuba. Following the realignment of forces within the Labor Party in 1974, in the aftermath of the resignation of Edward LeBlanc, Premier Patrick John recruited Seraphin to run for political office in 1975. John's decision would pay dividends in ensuing general elections. Eloquent and charismatic, Seraphin easily outpaced his political rivals and won a seat in the House of Assembly. In the following years, he served as Minister for Communications, Works and Housing, and later as Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. During his tenure, significant initiatives were undertaken in low-cost housing, particularly at Bath Estate and Canefield. He also spearheaded land distribution initiatives, import substitution, and agriculture diversification as part of his government socialist program. Seraphin was also responsible for the Wildlife Act, which he prohibited the hunting of the wildlife during the mating season. Seraphin's initiatives, like many of his other cabinet counterparts, were overtaken, however, by the machinations of John and the Attorney General Leo Austin. The euphoria which followed in the wake of the attainment of political independence in 1978 quickly dissipated, and in the following months there were cracks in the solidarity within the John government. As the John government careened towards a confrontation with its political opponents in 1979, a core of close supporters huddled together with their leader, leaving a few, including Seraphin, feeling increasingly alienated. The Defense Forces' actions on May 29, 1979, and the killing and wounding of unarmed protesters, followed by the stoning of the homes of important Labor Party supporters, proved the last straw. Seraphin, sensing that the political damage to John's government had become irreversible, submitted his letter of resignation to Prime Minister John. In it, he complained that I paid the political penalties by being maligned for my so-called boldness in bringing to the attention of Cabinet the alarming developments of which most Cabinet colleagues were ignorant. Seraphin's resignation and the rain of stones triggered by the May 29, 1979 events precipitated a mass exodus of the labor representatives. Perceived to be largely untainted by the width of corruption which hung over the Johns government, Seraphin was included in the 25-member Committee of National Salvation, appointed as an interim governing body before general elections in 1980. Comprised of representatives from the left, right, church, unions, students, agriculture, and the business sector, the CNS soon became racked by internal squabbles as the desperate contending forces jockeyed for leverage in the CNS. Seraphin's stock rose considerably when Mary Eugenia Charles, along with most of the representatives of business, the unions, and the church had coalesced, throwing a lot with Seraphin, with the result that by June 25, 1979, he emerged as the interim Prime Minister of Dominica. The new Prime Minister had little time to savor his victory. Hurricane David struck Dominica on August 29, 1979, with an intensity which left 56 dead, the destruction of 80% of the banana industry, and untold infrastructural damage. Sensing an opportunity, Seraphin sought to delay the 1980 elections to get as much assistance from sympathetic governments and NGOs. The opposition forces cried foul with the result that elections were set for July 1980. In the interim, political affinities determined the source and quantum of international aid. Rosie Douglas and Bernard Wilshire solicited U.S. $13 million from sympathetic governments. Grenadian Prime Minister Maurice Bishop and Cuban government offered a package which included a new hospital and 100 university scholarships, but only 11 scholarships were accepted. Seraphin threw in his lot with the pro-Western forces to prevent the left from gaining a foothold in Dominica. He trapezed to regional and international destinations seeking assistance. He enjoyed a decidedly close relationship with the U.S. Ambassador Sally Shelton to an extent that at one point, even Eugenia Charles complained that the U.S. was interfering in Dominica's internal affairs. Ultimately, however, Seraphin was not the major beneficiary of the U.S. influence. His involvement in the John administration, overlooked when he was appointed Prime Minister, proved a millstone around his neck. Charles, on the other hand, stood as a steadfast bulwark against forces of communism, a sentiment widely accepted by the electorate. The need for such a bulwark seemed to increase in 1979 with the overthrow of Grenada's Eric Gary and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. These developments made it easier to portray members of the left as communists intent on subverting Dominica's democratic traditions. This sentiment resonated in Dominica, given the support of the John administration by a few members of the left. Presented with a clear ideological choice between the U.S. traditions of free enterprise and what was framed as the cloven foot of communism, Dominicans chose the former in July 1980. Seraphin contested the elections as the leader of the Democratic Labour Party, along with the likes of Michael Douglas and Rosie Douglas. Members of the left included Bernard Wilshire, Dr. Para Revere, and Pierre Charles, coalesced under the banner of the Dominica Liberation Movement. Patrick John unsuccessfully contested the elections under the Labour Party banner. In the end, Seraphin's effort to regain a political advantage fell short. Crisscrossing Dominica in a helicopter, distributing OJ dollars and verbal letters donated food from overseas, triggered accusations of favoritism and colonialism. When the dust finally settled on July 19, 1980, Seraphin suffered a defeat at the hands of the Dominica Freedom Party. He subsequently gravitated towards the private sector, where he operates a hotel at Concord.
Okay, so we've heard the Dr. Irvin Andre's article. So Mr. Seraphin, your thoughts? I know you shared it with us in the documentary, but any additional thoughts on this piece?
I believe it was a very interesting perception. But of course, like so many Dominicans, there was the misreading, misconception, misinterpretation, and all of that as it pertains to the OJ dollar. There never was any money thrown from helicopters at any time. In fact, the OJ dollar represented a moment in time when we could have found our way to get assistance from the United States after a certain gentleman, in fact, let me name him, Charles Sovereign, who was in charge of the food desk, had decided that the time had come 6 months after the hurricane that we should now allow the private sector to become active. And consequently, he blocked any further assistance from the Americans, as it would mean that we'd have too much of an extended length of time to be given free food. And that was, in fact, a concern for the opposition Freedom Party, who thought that by giving free food to the people, that would be a political advantage. And so I was able to work very harmoniously with the Americans and came up with a project which was called the Food for Work program. And so what was supposed to be was that task forces would be built around the country. There would have been a coupon, a food coupon, which would be given to people for work done. So if a carpenter works for $30 a day and he gets 5 days for $150 worth of coupons, he goes to the coupon shop and he gets his money. So unfortunately, that program did not come through as planned because somebody robbed the place where the OJ dollars, so to speak, coupons was hidden at the stadium in Canefield. So that's one major upset here in terms of people's belief that there was some money that I made and that I was very rich by making that OJ dollar, but the OJ dollar was just a food coupon. Okay. So that's one of my observations on what he says. And of course, there is a perception also that the Cuban scholarship program emanated from Rosie Douglas. Of course, that's completely untrue. The reality is that Bernard Wilshire, who represented me, he was in fact represented here the University of West Indies extramural department, and he was not in government. And I sent him to Cuba to represent me because I was busy doing other things. And he did represent and spoke to the Cuban president about the possibilities of assistance to Dominica. The Cuban scholarship program happened to be one of them. Rosie Douglas came into Cuba without my knowledge. And
so Dr. Andre,
and we did have some situations about that as to how he would represent without having official representation, accreditation from the Prime Minister. So that was some of the little situations here. But of course, I must mention that I had met Fidel at the October-November United Nations. It was a C and D situation. He's sitting next to me. I was introduced to him, and he said, how can he help? And he did agree that he would assist us with the Cuban scholarship program. And of course, that was, of course, re-emphasized by Bernard Wilshire. And the story of Rosie was a good one in that after leaving government, after being removed from government by the electorate in the 80s, Eugenia Charles did not want to accept Cuban scholarships. And Rosie Douglas and Mike Douglas and other persons continued to accept the Cuban scholarship as a private arrangement between a political party, not the government, and the Cuban government. And one last thing I would say, the only time that the people of Dominica was able to get a government to accept Cuban scholarships was when the United Workers' Party came into government in 1995. That's when the Cuban government-to-government scholarship program continued. That's the history of the Cuban scholarship. Of course, I feel very proud. I was part of the process of how many hundreds of our Dominicans who have been trained in Cuba.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that point of clarification and your thoughts on that. We'll continue watching.
Does summarize a bit of your political career. Can you give us some comments on this article, and is it very relevant to what your experience was during your political career?
Well, first of all, I must compliment Dr. Andre. I think this article was written in 2008 or thereabouts.
Yes.
And between that time and we're in 2022 now, 23, we have not had an opportunity, I have not had an opportunity to interact with Dr. Andre or anybody else. And so there's a lot of the information that he gave, to a large extent, was correct. I mean, especially when it comes to the fact that he made references to the upbringing, my parents, and their lifestyle. They were very structured people. They knew about taking care of business when it comes to their children. I was a blessed child. I was 13 years before my sister came around. And so consequently, I must say they did the best they could. You know? And I found a way to get to know Dominica because my father was, in fact, he was even given an award, a national award, for his contribution to dominoes. So we went throughout the country of Dominica playing domino leagues, and that's how I got to know Dominica very well.
Nice.
And so his take on my parents was good.
Awesome.
To a large extent, he understood a lot of the politics.
Okay.
He did some research, that's very clear. He may not mention, certain things to do with the fact that when you left high school, and I left high school, I became the president of the Empire Club, or that Edison James was in fact the secretary of that same club. And that was a very interesting club because it was the persons who left in the early 60s, who left high school, moved to grammar school and academy, formed this club, and we elevated ourselves to enjoying sports and literally meeting and things of that sort. And I was a leader there. And so I demonstrated some level of leadership And in fact, before that, at the grammar school, which he didn't mention, I was the house captain of Benedict Joseph House.
Okay.
And the national athlete, you know, both in the short distances and long jump and high jump and so forth. And of course, there was some history to do with the fact that you know, I traveled to St. Lucia, representing Dominican and all of that.
Okay.
So there's that sports part of my
That was
life
missing.
that's missing. He didn't talk about my life as it pertains to music and culture. I mean, I was involved with the business of bringing bands from different parts, you know, of the Caribbean to perform at Greenland and so forth. So there's some missing parts to it. But generally, those are very good.
So can you tell us a little bit about the May 29th, the events leading up to May 29th in 1979, which was a very historical part of our country?
May 29th was brought about by the fact that the trade union movement, particularly the CSA, led by Charles Sumner, who became president of Dominica, mainly, and Eugenia Charles for the Freedom Party, who took offense to a couple of bills that the government was about to pursue. And they were able to get strong support from the masses to demonstrate against the patriotic regime. But my contention with having to resign had nothing to do with that whatsoever.
Understood.
I purely was expressing myself as the president of the party to the Premier, John, that I had, actually as Prime Minister at the time, that I had some matters of concern. And those matters of concern had to do with some principles, whereby I received some document, which just entered into my connection through somebody dropping it at my house. I don't know how it got there, but in there was some clear involvement of Leo Austin in South Africa and with offshore banking and a few other things of that sort.
And just to clarify, Leo Austin?
Leo Austin was the Attorney General and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And, you know, I had some issues with Leo Austin, you know. In fact, whilst he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I was the one who attended all the Foreign Affairs meetings in the region and outside of the region. And there was one occasion when somebody just turns up from nowhere and turns out to be an ambassador and so forth, and this person was of some South African connection. And I had those things with the government. Our situations with the 45 square miles and got to know it to the press, different things like that. And so I had
brewing already.
Yes, I was brewing, all those things were brewing. And then I did give John a clear position that I had. And if he cannot get rid of Leo Austin, based upon the fact that they have proven that he had done certain things that were illegal, including the formation of an offshore bank called the Federal Bank, and for which he was the vice president and nobody knew about it, not even in the cabinet. I said that this man should go. And then I resigned on that basis.
Okay.
I have nothing to do with the 29th of May over.
So prior to that?
Just prior to that. And so when that came about, I then decided to leave government. I have no intention of remaining anywhere. I was called upon, and that's the position.
So you mentioned you were called, and so May 29th occurs, and you receive a phone call you shared with me in the past, leading up to the need for a leader of the country, as the country is in turmoil.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your
Very interesting, because first of all, I'm no part of the Committee for National Salvation. For those who don't know, especially young ones, the Committee of National Salvation turns out to be an organization of persons who represented the leadership of every considerable organization of the country. Be it church, be it youth, be it the trade union movement, whatever business community, the Dominican Association of Industry and Commerce, and so forth. And so that was what it was.
Okay.
So in other words, it did represent the country of his word.
Okay.
And was widely supported by the great majority of persons who belongers to those organizations. And they decided that they needed to take some responsibility to get the country out of the situation of this constitutional crisis. Because the president and the Ganzo had left the country. The president, Kuzlati, who Patrick John tried to appoint in his absence of the first president, he was harassed and his house was attacked and his vehicle was turned over, his life was threatened, and he resigned. So there was no president. And most of the ministers of government had to resign because of the pressure that they were getting from the mobs and such. And that was rampant throughout the country. And so there was a revolution. And therefore, there was need to find someone who would bring it all together. I was called upon to do it. Despite the fact that I was sick, I took the responsibility to accept that. However, there were conditions.
And you recall that you were actually, you had already resigned and left, and you were, where were you actually when that happened?
Well, I was home. I was at one rooster I lived. And what transpired was, with the increasing mob reaction that was taking place, we were threatened, my wife and myself and my first son, we were threatened by the presence of boots on the ground around my premises on the nights whilst we sleep. Like defense force persons were around. We felt that there's a chance of some very bad things happening to us, put it that way. And we decided to go to the countryside, to a family place, and we got to Venus and Pocastle on the way to Atkinson. We spent the night, and I was told that by someone who got in touch with me who forgot I was at Venus and told me that I'm called upon by the Committee for National Salvation to come back to town because they have an offer of the Prime Ministership for me. So someone came to pick me up the next morning, and I drove down to the parish hall where I met this crowd of persons. And the intention was to make me a Prime Minister, but I found it difficult for me to accept that I would be a Prime Minister merely without a process of the Constitution or Parliament or whatever.
So what path did you find? Since the country was in turmoil, the Prime Minister is being threatened at the time, and the President, we don't have a President, CNS reaches out, and you're trying to find a path to this leadership in an authentic way. What was the means at the time that the minds of the time came up with?
Well, all I can say is this. The CNS is a body of persons representing the country, as it were. And so there was a clear revolution because ministers had resigned, members of the parliament themselves had resigned, and so there was no way in which the parliament could be convened into having a vote of no confidence, as some of the persons of more recent times are trying to interject as a means by which constitutionality would have been responded to. The Constitution had to be set aside at that point because we had found ourselves into a revolutionary situation.
Right.
There were no answers in sight. And hence the country called upon me to accept the responsibility. And at that time, the Defense Force was supportive of Patrick John. To a large extent, the police force supported the Freedom Party. And I am coming in with the knowledge that I do not have that commitment from either the Defense Force or the police. So then the question basically was, what do I do? I found out that there was, through my Douglas and Gramax, represent the boss of Gramax, who Jeff Joseph, they came to see me and told me that there's a plan afoot to get a mob to go to Patrick John's place to remove him by way of force, by having him to put a resignation on paper. I happen to know because I happen to be made aware by persons who informed me that Patrick John had started putting sandbags in preparation for an attack to his premises. It was told to me by my sources that there was a plan afoot, somehow or the other, whether it's dead or alive, that they were going to get Patrick John out of government. And I realized that the situation was grave.
And dangerous.
And dangerous. And as a result, I met with Eustace Francis, an attorney and a very strong personality, who understood what was going on. And we agreed to form the Democratic Labour Party. And we called upon some of the members of the Parliament of Patrick John to join with me. And we together joined with Eugenia Charleston's Freedom Party, members of the House, and some other independents to form a majority of persons in the Parliament to give the authority so I could become a president. In Prime Minister, by some process, and to create the avenue by which a president could be formed and be accepted. And that was what, in fact, saved the nation. And I would say that my contribution to Dominican would be that I was able to remove us from a position where we had revolution, we had the complete dismantling of the constitution, and was able to get into government and return the country back to the people with a constitutional life, which exists up to today.
And for that, Dominica, thanks you.
So we've heard a little bit about that transition, Mr. Seraphin, from you resigning May 29th and returning the country back in a stable condition. Any additional thoughts on what you've said in your documentary?
Well, you know, one of the misunderstandings as to the whole scenario in that period of time, a lot of people suffer from loss of memory, and others deliberate, others mischievous. But at the end of the day, the reality is that the CNS was the people. That's the organization of the people, right? Every church in the country was represented in the CNS. And every organization would be the private sector or the civil service or whatever were represented by them. But when Hurricane David came, which we'll speak about, I guess, later on, arrived, they virtually disappeared. They left me to carry the burden with some comrades I can see right here in this room at this time. Two of my brothers are here. And we had to carry the burden of that country. And so I declared in the parliament that the CNS has been blown away by the wings of David. I had nothing further to do with them. And as time went by, there was a situation where I did arrange with Patrick John, interestingly enough, that's something not known to the historians, that he would give me support on the condition that those persons who were Freedomites within the coalition, and by the way, another aspect which is amusing to me is the first coalition that the historians talk about is the one of Rosie Douglas and the Freedom Party in 2000. But there was a coalition government. There was a coalition government in 1979. The Freedom Party joined up with me to get me the numbers as well as the independents. That's how I was able to get the constitutional, at least some semblance of a constitutional mandate to become the leader of the country. And so the coalition government was there, and Patrick John said, if you could get rid of those guys, I will give you support. And so somewhere along the area there where I was able to find fault with Brian Arlene and Charles Maynard of the Freedom Party and Afi Martin of the Alliance. They will be removed. I got support from Patrick so to do. And during that half period of year, somewhere around October, for those who are going to be fact-checking me as I speak, the reality is that the CNS controlled government disappeared. And what reappeared was a new government of labor. That's something that people don't seem to understand what transpired. There was a Labour Party that was reintroduced to the people by way of me having to appoint a number of senators, including Felix Thomas. And these are people who talk today very positively about the political agendas, etc. And there was also Robinson, who is also quite a very common name in the news media, who was made a senator. And guess who was made a senator as well? Papi was made a senator. And so what I'm saying here is that we did have another government outside of the CNS that moved us into the period of elections in the year to come. I thought that might be interesting thoughts for those of you who are historians and who want to know the truth. And I suggest that any historian who dare to challenge it, I'm there to accept that challenge. That's the truth.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We're also here for some persons who also have their first-hand experience of this time as well as we continue watching.
You succeeded first Prime Minister Patrick Roland John, who brought Dominica to independence in 1978, and you became the second Prime Minister of Dominica in 1979. You managed a severe national disaster, a natural national disaster in 1979, with the advent of a 175 miles per hour strong Hurricane David. But no Dominican got left behind. And you gave life to the term, all shall eat, no matter their religious or political persuasion, even in the face of a severe, truly a people's person, a consummate politician. You helped ensure that young, fledgling, independent Dominica continued on a path to democracy by putting country first and acceding to the urgent request of the nationwide, broad-based, cross-sectoral Committee for National Salvation, so as to ensure a constitutional solution to an otherwise chaotic, crippling national socio-economic crisis in 1979, which brought Dominica to its knees for 41 full days, with all cultural, social, and economic activities at a complete standstill in that same year, 1979. You, OJ, rose to the occasion. You helped to put an end to that crisis. No one knows what Dominica would have looked like today if you had not answered that call to serve and lead from the Committee for National Salvation. Oliver J. Seraphin, OJ, you will forever be remembered in the history of Dominica as the young Prime Minister who took Dominica from crisis to recovery. And at the same time, you preserved its fledgling democracy. Very, very well done, OJ. So keep on living the good life well beyond the age of 80 with your wonderful family. My friend, have a terrific birthday.
And those of you watching and listening, this is the voice of the CEO of one of our media houses, Mr. Sheridan Gregoire, and that was one of his recollection and thoughts on the timestamp that we're speaking of. We also have another person who is also very close to you at the time, Mr. Gordon Henderson, who had some thoughts to share as well as we continue watching.
Hello, OJ. This is Gordon Henderson wishing you a very happy birthday. And most of all, wishing you many more and the best of health. I hope you can share it with your family. Share your days of innovation at the Green Lantern. Share the days when you were Perry, smartly dressed as an insurance agent, owner of an airline company, Prime Minister of a country, and so much more. Happy birthday, buddy, and joy. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, OJ. Happy birthday to you.
And that was from your dear friend, Mr. Gordon Henderson, giving us some cheer. As some of you may know, we shared last night through Emo News that we celebrated your 80th birthday and your 45th anniversary with your family and friends. Lots of people who traveled and traveled back to celebrate you. This documentary is also a culmination of your life and your legacy. So great thoughts there. We also have someone else, I will continue watching, and there's an interesting topic coming up in the next section, which I learned growing up. I learned the term burgodo, I say, and I guess there's another way to say it. What is the Dominican way of saying it? I say burgodo with a tone, but can you say it directly? Burgodo. So we'll learn about burgodo in the next section as you explain it in the documentary. And you will play for us.
What else in this article you would say that leads you to agree to a level of agreement? The Dr. Irving mentioned the story about helicopter and this famous word or infamous word called burgodo. Can you expound on where did that term come from?
You know, I mean, that's where I thought that my good friend Irvin Andre departed from his usual very demonstrative level of accuracy. You know? And I think he kind of just moved into the Dominican story as it pertains to the creation of information which I call disinformation, you know, which is now more popularly said, you know, fake news. Because Brogodo, and interesting enough, let me just pause a minute on it. Prime Minister Skerritt in very recent times said that all that OGF achieved in Hurricane David was to give people Brogodo. Now, on reflection, when Andrew makes that point about Brogodo, I am concluding that people don't get the nuance of that terminology. I think it is better now that I clear it, so that the younger persons who have heard that term will understand what I meant. I have been involved in a tremendous amount of effort to get support throughout the countries of the world.
That's after Hurricane
David. And a large number of persons responded, that organizations responded, and the Red Cross and a number of other organizations. And so when the items started arriving, they were to be put into a warehouse, or warehouses. But because they came in big bales, etc., sometimes clothing, sometimes other aspects of needs, you know, even down to food wares and stuff, plates and cups and knives and things like that. So they were brought into those boxes. And when they were thrown into the floor, it makes a noise on the wooden floor. And then, of course, out of that came some very nice clothing. And persons, when they see them, you don't know, they can have a sense of humor already. For every food is a name. And so when they see if a fancy clothes come out of a hurricane environment, where there's no store to sell clothes, but you have brand new clothes, this person's wearing Brogodo. That's the story of Brogodo.
Okay.
In a nutshell.
It's more comical than descriptive.
It's more comical than descriptive, but in the description is alluding to the fact that it's such a lack of effort. And in fact, the reverse is true. It's because of such a huge effort that such numbers of bales of stuff was arriving from all corners of the world. And so it should not be used in a disrespectful way, or a manner that demonstrates some lack of governance, but rather the opposite.
Understood.
The achievement of achieving persons from outside to respond to our needs.
Well, thank you for clearing that up for us.
No problem.
Okay, so I'm sure the audience knows a little more about that, and some of you may have experienced or even had some Brogodo or enjoyed the Brogodo, and there was so many in surplus because of the efforts. So again, Dominic in his own way coined in his own terms of that. Any additional thoughts before we move on to a peer who...
Well, my thoughts are as follows, that you will come to the point of what a lot of persons, because I understand, you know, I'm older generation, so I'm not into the Facebook comments and so on. So as this program is going on, people are there pressing their buttons and saying their things. I say, hold your horses. You will hear what Al Jazeera does now. So stop punching. It will come.
Yes, and that is coming up very shortly, because the public does want to hear your thoughts and your take as you starred in a scene on the famous Al Jazeera. So that's coming up shortly. But we do want to hear from Mr. Pierre, who also had his thoughts on Hurricane David on May 29th, as well as he lived it and experienced it himself.
In 1881, that was the Dominican-related political flame when you had the ousting of Prime Minister Patrick John, but OJ becomes the interim Prime Minister. And then you had a Hurricane David in 79 before that took place, and he was battling a natural disaster and a political disaster. And he worked himself through it, he battled through it. Dominicans were united behind him, and because we saw the recovery, you know, it was really, you know,
Yes, would you like to
Yeah, I'd like to add to him, Pierre. Pierre is one of the most successful Dominicans. He's in fact a millionaire status now in the Virgin Islands, a builder. And when I knew him, he was an ordinary guy. And he came to see me at Springfield and said to me that he had found a situation in Guadeloupe that's disturbing. Dominicans were being beaten by the people of Guadeloupe. For whatever reason, I believe it had to do with some belief that they were taking their jobs, that they were taking over their market where they were selling their agricultural produce. And Dominicans became the hated figures in Guadeloupe. And they were being beaten and harassed and so on with all kinds of weapons. And he came and reported this to me, and I immediately called the prefect's office, and they sent a helicopter. I always seem to have a helicopter story. Anyway, they sent a helicopter to pick me up, and I went in there and met with the various persons in the government of Guadeloupe, the prefect and the other persons important in the country. And they asked me to go on public television, and to inform the people. And I had to remind them that in the time of de Gaulle, when we had the wars that was going on, when Germany had taken over France, that they came here to Dominica to get rescued. Both Guadeloupe and Martinique came here in Dominica. And I had to remind them that they owe us something, that they cannot treat our citizens that way and so on. And I went to the hospital and found a lot of Dominicans in the various wards, all beaten up and what have you. And anyway, shortly after that, the whole matter was resolved and peace came to the country. But it was that same gentleman, Pierre, who alerted me to that problem of God. By the way, the historians don't talk about that at all. When it comes to OJ, somehow they get silent. I thought maybe if my father's name was something else, it should have been called, or maybe some other big name, that Seraphin, who's that fellow there, his father came from Fontainebleau. So therefore, I'm brought down to a certain level. I'm sorry to say that, but that's how I feel about it. However, that's the truth of the reality, was that we did have a solution to the Guadeloupe incident through Pierre.
Okay. And we'll hear from another former minister of government who also worked very much closely with you throughout that time period we're speaking of, and that's Mr. Ferdinand Parent-Law, who is going to speak very shortly once Ms. Henderson has it out for us. Yes.
Seraphin?
One word, blessed.
I first met you at the Dominican Grammar School in 1957 as Seraphin 80th. Later that year, as neighbors on Old Street, you became just Oliver to me. I remember from the outset your infectious, seemingly permanent smile, augmented by a seductive eyes as being your trademark. Lily has preserved those very well by the grace of God. You still had that same countenance when we videoed recently, courtesy of your granddaughter. In the late 50s, we both became attracted to the politics of the Libla and Low Black, marking us at that early age as identifying with the labor movement. Our interaction was interrupted by my 11 and a half years spent in the United Kingdom. On my return in 1972, we soon reconnected, and like you, I became a member of the Dominican Labour Party that was, but sadly, is not now. Let me repeat that. The Labour Party that was, but sadly, is now not. A candidate for the Collier constituency in 1975 general election was never part of my ambition. Yet, I will always remember my first appearance on a public political platform in your company in Kulbistre. From that point on, the theme that marked our territory on the political platform was our passionate advocacy for the underprivileged, especially the poor farmers. I am very conscious of the ultimate cost to you personally because of your politics. I will never forget the fate of your craft boutique in Roseau post-interim government, and more recently, the fate of Floral Gardens. We have come a long way since, much water under the bridge. Yet I must backtrack a bit to mention one of the developments that followed the coup d'etat of 1979. I have always reflected that those of us members of the then Labour Party who served in the interim government unwittingly became the sacrificial lambs for the good of our country, and in so doing, sealed the rise of the Freedom Party to power in the 1980s. One of their platform slogans then was, and I quote, "Don't put hungry people to serve food on board." They did not, indeed, they dared not articulate the dangerous alternative of assigning that responsibility to the greedy. Well, since the coalition after the 2000 general election, our lovely Isle of Beauty, Isle of Splendor have, to all intents and purposes, become the private property of neo-colonial, merciless mercenaries.
All right. So any thoughts on that? Or would you like to?
Yeah, just a thought. I think we need a perspective here. 1980 elections. We were young, vibrant, energized by a belief that there was an ideological path, feeding the less fortunate, land for the landless, which I'll talk about later on, and other important aspects of what Libla stood for, which was aliens landholding license. That is to say, If an alien wants to buy land in our country, he must first of all have, the maximum would be an acre. And if it's more than an acre, it must be something that demonstrates a good for the country. There was the Beach Ordinance Act, which meant that the beaches of Dominica belongs to Dominicans. There's no way you could have a private beach or a private hotel. It's ours. The thinking that all shall eat was important as well. Educational programs and so forth. That's what energized us. But in 1980, we had a very strange phenomenon. I know I'm taking time there to say it, but it's important that people understand it. In 1980, the trade union movement, which grew out of the need for people's representation at the grassroots level, against that of the persons who are the owners of the big, large estates and the business houses and so on. The poor people, the Malawi, had a grouping of connection with an organization called the Trade Union Movement to establish their rights. And so in 1980, we had a number of trade unions. We had WAU, DAU, Dominica Trade Union, and of course, there was another JMOTS union, which name I forgot right now. There were 5 or 6, of course, the Dominica Civil Service Association. And strange enough, every one of them, every union you could think about in 1980 was supporting the employer, the controller, the landowners, and they forgot that responsibility to the Malawi and the less fortunate. And so I'm saying so that in 1980, they turned against not only PJ, but they turned against OJ as well. OJ's father, who was a tailor, who became a businessman, whose mother was working the market as a stall bearer, and who ended up with a shop successfully and so on. That was not respected. What was respected was we too poor to, as this gentleman said, to be taking care of the business of the country. And so in 1980, let me make that very abundantly clear. What transpired is that unfortunately, PG and myself had an agreement that he'd stand down, maybe make president or something, and allow one Labour Party to contest. He contested. The arriving intellectuals that formed themselves in the alliance also contested. So you had PJ contesting, you had OJ contesting, you had the alliance contesting, and the Freedom Party on the other side. So clearly, who would win? I mean, let's be honest. Some people like to blame me, oh, OJ, you should have called the elections before and so on because you're so popular. No, it was not that at all. The machinations have taken place, and we lost. Time has gone by, and whatever is happening right now. But I thought I would establish that point, that my losing 1980 was not a question as to OJ not calling elections on time. It was that the people had moved on.
So essentially the votes were divided.
Actually, that's what happened.
Okay. And we'll continue watching. We do have someone who also adds a little bit of your character and flair coming up with number 13. A little bit of your character flair. He remembers something that stands out to him was your manner in which you dressed, your manner of life, your PMA, as we'll hear a little bit about. So we'll have Mr. Levi Lugwa coming up in the documentary as we watch. Okay.
Hi, I'm Levi Super Elder Black, living in Canada. I want to say greetings from Toronto. I am very proud to be celebrating the 80th birthday of Dominican Interim Prime Minister, Honorable Oliver Seraphin, OJ, aka OJ, my friend. I consider him my friend. But even before that, I was a kid, 10 years old, and OJ was representing my mom in the insurance business at that time. And when he first came to my doorstep, it's supposed to be a joke, yeah? When he first came to my doorstep, OJ was such sleek, neat, uniform, handsome. My father shouted out, I was in the front, and my mom was in the little boutique we had, a little shop we had. Taking up like epi over Ireland, comme tu dis, en soupir. My mother said, no, it's Paris son on the hill above us there. So I remember that, but you didn't hear that, but you understand. And then he came in and then he made friends with my mom, and then he started coming home every often to, to represent my mom and deal with the insurance situation. And then I get to know him as I growing up with my dad and him now, having conversation in front of our doorstep, downtown places, in politics. And I think where I get closer to OJ is because of my dad. I was everywhere with my dad in the political time, the Premier of Dominica, Oliver Black, Patrick John, all these people. But OJ was something special for my dad and me, and it grew up on me because OJ was always neat, sleek, well-spoken. Now, that's a role model right there, and I really admire him for the way he looked, and a lot of the other set. They were very impressed with him. OJ told Lee, you did nothing wrong. OJ is a handsome man, and that made me look up to OJ. And when me as a Dominican artist go on stage, I want to look like guys like OJ and a few like OJ. But when I used to work as an entertainer at the Dominican City Hotel, Anchorage Hotel, Portia Hotel, Castaways Hotel, that's when Lee and himself would be coming there, and he always supported the art form, always supported Calypsonians, musicians. He liked his shaping, he liked his calypso, he liked a lot of things dealing with Dominica, the culture. And I was very motivated because Lily used to tell me what OJ said. And I'm telling you honestly, as an artist, I felt to myself that if he had gotten a field deal, OJ would have done even more if he had gotten his wings to fly to do great for Dominica, because he had a real good dream. And I think that knowing him as a politician, his heart was always true. And the smile alone will take you, the smile. And that's what I like about OJ, the foot appearance, that kind of thing. And I really appreciate him being who he were at the time. And it's a while now, but good things never just fade away, because after today, I am what I am because, as I said, for the sophistication of people like OJ. So OJ, I want to thank you, and I want to celebrate with you in a big way. I want to cheers to you. You were godfather to one of my family members, and my mom loved you, my dad loved you, may your soul rest in peace. On behalf of the Low Black, the Honorable Easy Low Black, Honorable Easy Low Black family, thanks for being a friend. Lady, thank you, and I wish you much, much more. Happy birthday, happy 80th birthday. Cheers. OG, young man.
And of course, we had the pleasure of hearing from Mr. Low Black himself. Any thoughts on this fond memory of?
Yeah, well, Low Black, everybody knows Double L. He's an entertainer, and he just proved it now. However, I had a period in my life when I was very much into business of music and all of that. I was the manager of the Liquid Ice Band, and I had a club called the Green Lantern Club. And that was the club of the day. Everybody of the older generation remember Green Lantern. In fact, we began having Friday night dances in Dominica, the Green Lantern called the Happy Hour dance, because Dominicans only danced on Saturday nights. So it was big, and I brought in quite a number of bands into Dominica, from St. Lucia, from Antigua, and so on, Trinidad. So I had a music side to my life as well, and he's just reminded me about it, and for which I'm grateful that he reminds me that there was, before I became a full-fledged person who believes purely in making sure that we do music to the Lord, there was music to man that I was involved with.
That is definitely a different perspective on your life, because we always wondered if you had a musical side to you, and we verified that you do. We'll continue on as that former senior banker, Mr. Louis Robinson, also has a take on your political career, because we are speaking about your career. There's many facets to your life, which we'll summarize and get to. This is a very fully complete documentary, which is over 2.5 hours, but we'll only highlight some things and go into other things and other discussions. But we want to hear from Mr. Louis Robinson, as he does have an interesting take on your leadership back then, and we get very closely to the
I will become a Prime Minister of Dominica, but one of the youngest Prime Ministers that came to the country. He assumed the responsibility of Prime Minister for the Commonwealth of Dominica. He was just about 36 years old then, but he assumed it at one of the most challenging times in the history of Dominica. He became the Prime Minister within a year after we achieved independence, right after the overthrow of a constitutionally elected government, and Hurricane David followed on the heels of that. So you had a country that was devastated. However, his age did not prevent him from stabilizing the country from the result of the overthrow of the constitutionally elected government. Finding assistance to provide to all Dominicans at the time. There was never any one complaint about anyone not having received shelter, food, or clothing after Hurricane David. Never a complaint. And it shows that while maybe some others were asleep, quite happy, he was up toiling through the night to ensure that the rule of law had been restored, that the country was prepared and ready for the next election. And he did not use the opportunity to stay in power. He used it to unite the country after a natural disaster like Hurricane David. Some of us who were alive and were born by then can remember the devastation. And those of us who are alive and who care to remember the unconstitutional overthrow of a constitutionally elected government. These were the times at which young Oliver Seraphin governed Dominica. His stint may have been short, but it was sweet. The kind of disunity and discord that we have now did not exist. The kind of poverty that pervaded the country did not exist. In fact, our crops rebounded very rapidly. We still had Ross University, we had DCP, we had other industries going on, and the country was doing very well. So I think we owe a gratitude to the former Prime Minister Oliver Seraphin. And as my friend, I would like to thank him for the opportunity he gave me to be a member of his cabinet, wet my feet, so to speak, in politics. And I thank him for the steadfastness of the hands that kept the ship of state afloat and sailing without difficulty. Let me, on behalf of my family, friends, and Dominicans in general, for your timely intervention on the scene to rescue and unite the country and to put Dominica back in a lawful state. Sadly, we have descended into unlawfulness, but you did your part. Thank you, O.J. God bless you and your lovely wife, Lily. Grace, mercy, and peace be unto you and your family.
So, Mr. Seraphin, we heard that Mr. Louis Robinson, not only former banker, but was also part of your cabinet. You want to share a little bit about that relationship, and we'll move on to some of your greatest achievements.
Historians have taken the liberty, and I need to expose the historians here. They are taking the liberty of saying what my friend Louis have just said, that his stint was short. And if you get the message, almost everybody that you get the information from, nobody was there for a short while. I wasn't there for a short while. In 1970, at the age of about 25, 26, thereabout, I was the chairman of the Central Housing and Plan Authority. In 75, before I was actually 30, no, just around 30 years, I became a minister of government. I continued serving my country, where I was a director of the Aid Bank and also chairman, director of the NDC for about 10 years under Eugene H. as representing the Hotel and Tourism Association, and also representing the small hotel association called ESSA. I was made under the United Workers' Party, although I was not known to be supporting the United Workers' Party, because I came from the Labour Party. I was made chairman of the National Development Corporation. And so I served another 5 years. So over a period of time, I served 30 years of service to my country. Not a short stint, a long stint. Too long, some people would have said. And I'll say this too, that Rosie Douglas served 6 months. Yet he is supposed to be larger than life. I would also like to say too, that Pierre Charles was in government for about 3 years. I was in government for 5. Patrick John was a prime minister for 6 months, though a premier for 4 years. So when you talk about stint, I place myself in the same stint position as Pierre Charles, as Rosie Douglas, and even as Patrick John as prime minister. So let's stop the stint story, and let's get that straight. I served long and hard, and I do not think that I've got the respect for that service. And I wouldn't hide to say I'm 80 years old, after all. If at that age I can't speak my mind, when will I start?
Agreed. And it's good to put it into perspective when you put it that way, juxtaposed to Pierre Charles and Rosie Douglas, who are receiving the genuine accolades of their leadership. It is good to put it in that perspective. And thanks for sharing the history of your leadership in the country, not just as the Prime Minister, but also in the civil service. So thank you for sharing that. And we will move on to another person who knows you very well and has also served alongside with you, Mr. Felix Thomas, who had some words to share, as well as his experience with you.
One that has been a major change in
Let me say to you, my dear friend, O.J. Seraphin, that from birth you have been a wonderful person. You can best be remembered as one having the unenvious task of bringing peace and tranquility to our country. Even when you lay sick upon your bed, you were called to rescue our country, Dominica, as a result of strife, chaos, anarchy, resulting even in death. Not for a moment did you hesitate to play your role. Notwithstanding that, you were further tested by the advent of Hurricane David, one of the worst storms to hit any country
That was in 1979. The same year that you were called to rescue the dying country. You're a man of principle. You sacrifice even your political future to ensure not that you only studied your political gains, but to ensure that Dominicans could be rescued and have a better way of life. Your service to the country, not only as Prime Minister, as Minister of Agriculture, your service to the people of the nation, and the example that you show to the world, one of the reasons I firmly believe that the Heavenly Father have extended life to you, approaching the age of 80, and even a happy marriage for over 45 years. You know, these things are blessings from Almighty Yahweh. You did not realize it then. But I can tell you, my brother, count it as a blessing and as a reward from Almighty Yahweh. Because He is the one who gives life, and especially extended life. You are still in good health. There are many years ahead of you. Yet, I just pray God's blessings upon you, and to just wish to thank you as one of the persons who served with you in this period of crisis. And that is how I want to remember you, as a man, as a savior at that time. And most importantly, you have recognized the blessings of Almighty Yahweh. And today, you are in His service, giving it back all today. Happy birthday and happy wedding anniversary. May Yahweh bless you, and may Yahweh continue to bless you and your entire family abundantly.
So we have the honor of having this gentleman also in the audience as well. So do you have any thoughts on that relationship and those memories?
Felix, hardworking, an activist, but more recently I found out that his wife is not doing well, and he's become patient, caring, and loving to his family, his wife in particular. And I wish God's blessing upon him to continue meeting the requirements, not the political matters of his life, but more importantly, his personal life. And I trust that God will bless him to continue that very difficult journey he's encountering right now. He mentioned agriculture. Again, there we go. I would like the historians, when I'm back at them, to recognize that my journey is not about prime ministership of Dominica. My journey is before and after. And before I was prime minister, I was Minister of Agriculture. And there was the coconut rehabilitation program, which I was able to get financed from Canada through CEDA, and brought the coconut production of Dominica to a level it has never had before. There was also the tree crop diversification program, where every form of agricultural produce that we needed to have to uplift our country was being managed through irrigation, through feeder roads, and what have you. Fisheries department was also handled well. The cooperative movement for agricultural youth was established in the country. There was more agricultural activity then, I believe, than most people can recall. And so, when you speak about legacy, my legacy is to claim that aspect of it, the agriculture of Dominica. When I was Minister of Agriculture, when I had a permanent secretary called Dudley Castor from Marigot, young man, and Colin Bully, who also was my chief agricultural officer. We were young. When we went to a meeting of Windban one time, the people, the senior men, the senior ministers said, but what's happening here? Boy Scouts have become leaders of Dominica because of our youth. And so I recognize the mention of agriculture as something that touches me right there inside, that there was a lot of activity in the agricultural sector during my time as Minister of Agriculture. Just want to remind the historians, they seem to forget.
And there's so much material in this documentary which we will have available to any of the media houses or to anyone who would like to have it, and we'll also upload it as well into YouTube. But one of the questions and one of the areas we spoke about, which was which one of was your greatest achievements? and we spoke about land. Can you just touch on, as you talked on agriculture, some of your impact into land and land distribution in our history of Dominica as well?
I think Bernard Wilshire may have
Yes.
mentioned it.
Yes.
Is he still to come?
He's on, yes.
Yeah. But let me just jump over before he makes his comment. I would like to make a bold statement, a very bold statement. There's been no minister, prime minister before me or after me that have taken the amount of lands of Dominica and distributed the way that it was done during my term as Minister of Agriculture and as Prime Minister. I'm talking about Soufriere Estate. The historians better go and check it out, you know. We are having sulfur spring baths in Wharton Waveland. That land was acquired by me in my time of government. The same has happened also with Mont Prosper, with lands in Trafalgar, lands in Layou, lands in Chance, different lands in the areas of Salisbury, the heights of Wesley. Just recently there was some strike going on in Mariga. That land was acquired and given to a cooperative in Mariga. And so I could keep on going and on and on. Sometimes I even spoke to one of the surveyors and I said, we must write the history of land reform. There is no prime minister, no minister of government that have taken as much land as I did and distributed to the people of our country, including Glogomye. And land that was given to the Rastas up in going towards Stephen. And so this is one area that I consider, if I were to be told what do you think that you've done most in our country that made a change, I would say it was land reform.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll hear from another former senior civil servant, Ms. Judith Pestina, who also got to work with you and experience some of your political career as well.
As a leader at a time of need during Hurricane David. I think I did a good job there.
First of all, I want to extend my warmest congratulations on Oliver's attainment of this milestone. And of course, the simultaneous celebration of your 45th wedding anniversary. Not many can attest to such an achievement. So you two must have done something right. I hope you both enjoy life's richest blessings, as well as continued good health, joy, peace, and happiness. So where did it all begin? I had joined the Ministry of External Affairs just before Hurricane David devastated our island in 1979. I had the opportunity to work with Oliver during his term as Prime Minister. He was debonair, amenable, and easy to work with. But what stood out most at the time was his ability to drive home the needs of his country while he led an important delegation to the United Nations, the United States, and Canada, seeking support for Dominica from friendly allies, which helped the island to recover and rebound from the destruction unleashed by Hurricane David. I was privileged to be part of that delegation, which also included Philip Nassif, Colin Bully, and the late President, Dr. Nicholas Liverpool. I well remember the success of such a mission, which created avenues for its rebuilding effort. I also distinctly remember a meeting with the late John Archibald, owner of Springfield Estates and one of Dominica's most generous benefactors. So much so, many will still recall that the Prime Minister's residence and office was situated for some time at Springfield. It was also during that time that Dominica had strong cultural and linguistic ties with the Francophone community. Being a full member of the Agence de Coopération Technique. It was during Prime Minister Seraphin's time in office that I was appointed Dominica's national correspondent for that agency. And for many years, Dominica benefited greatly from such ties, seeing the development of projects which led to the publication of a Creole dictionary and a study of Dominica's medicinal herbs which now seems to have been a project well ahead of its time. This relationship augured well for Dominican students of the French language, seeing many of them studying in Francophone countries. Official visits were paid to Dominica by the then presidents of Senegal and the two secretaries general of the Agence. Cultural links between Dominica and several Francophone countries flourished, and locally, various activities promoting the French language were initiated and continued for many years. He came to office at a momentous time in Dominica's history, and one which shaped the country's political and developmental landscape. It's a moment which has been etched in the lives of many Dominicans at home and abroad. And for those of us who had the opportunity to be part of that history, it is one which had a significant impact on our lives, as it must have been on his. I wish you well, Oliver, as you celebrate your 80th birthday, and trust that with the support of your wife, family, and friends, Dominicans will give you the kudos you deserve. Congratulations once again.
So we heard from Ms. Judith Festina. Any thoughts on that as we move on?
Yeah, simply to say this, that we are in Europe. We are in Europe, and that somehow we have lost that understanding of that relevance. We are in Dominica. 50 miles is Europe. Guadeloupe, 50 miles Martinique. And I became a very good friend of the foreign minister, Oliver Stern, and I established relationships with the French. And we were closely associated with Guadeloupe during my period of time in government, to the extent that even when Rosie Douglas won his election in 2000, that one of my contact persons who informed Mr. Douglas through a letter, which I will make available to whoever wants to see it, it's too long to read right now, to say that we are now welcome through our agent, Mr. Oliver Seraphin, that's the French government. We will be happy to invite you to hold discussions of mutual interest for development. So my relationship with France and the French was well known. And so I believe if I were to advise at all, I'm not supposed to keep it back. I mean, my level of maturity says that I should say what I want to say. And I'm saying that it would be relevant for the administration or agencies of the administration to begin a very aggressive relationship with the French. After all, we are 50 miles away. And so my son, who came from Florida just recently to recognize my birthday, went fishing just outside Guadeloupe a couple of days ago, you know. Fishermen from Anse-Dimé and Pébouche and other places, Portsmouth, we are moving to Marie-Galante and so on, almost, in fact, during Maria, people would go to Marie-Galante and to Saints and so on to buy as if they were going to Roseau. So it seems to me that there is that need to establish a stronger relationship with the French. That's my advice for who wants to take it.
Thank you for sharing that. And we'll hear from Bernard Wilshire, who also experienced you. And right up after that is our take on Al Jazeera, and you get to share a little more about what your experience was, your thoughts, your feelings, and we'll get to question and answers very shortly as we're moving along. I will also summarize what is also still in the documentary, so we could share and we could talk a little more, or you could view it yourself on your own time. So we'll move on to number 21.
Scholarships, and that's what we got over this exercise.
So this is where the Cuban scholarships were brought.
That's initially when we are.
Okay.
O.J. O'Perry, as many of us know him, definitely has an honorable place in our island's history, because not only did he answer the call to special service in the political crisis of 1979, when he was able, through great charm and political acumen, to pilot the country through that crisis and to avoid what might otherwise have been fratricidal violence and mayhem. But he was able to advance the long struggle for aspiration of the masses of the people to gain access to good land by redistributing some of the historical plantations on which their ancestors had been enslaved. I am very proud of the fact that in his capacity as PM, he chose to send me to represent Dominica at the Non-Aligned Conference in Havana in 1979, following the devastation of Hurricane David, with instructions to do my best to secure assistance for our country at that most difficult juncture. Out of that mission came the systematic program under which literally hundreds of Dominicans gained opportunities for university education and professional development. It is also little known that the other program under which many Cuban doctors were sent to help shore up our medical services was started at that time also. These were real tangible achievements for the country at the time, for which OJ can take full credit as the visionary political leader at a crucial time. Of course, OJ will always be associated with the efficient administration of the huge relief effort following Hurricane David, which enabled virtually the whole population to survive that terrible natural disaster. Of course, he couldn't have done it all without the very able and loving support of his dear wife, Lily. His contemporaries may not have been, but history will be kind to Oliver J. Seraphin.
And of course, this is a voiceover for Bernard Wiltshire. He sent in a letter as part of the celebration, and he was able to say in person last evening in an audience of approximately 100 of your closest friends and loved ones, essentially the same thing, and even more until we had to continue and to prompt. But Mr. Bernard Wiltshire echoed the sentiment that he loved working with you and all your contributions. Any thoughts on his comment? Then we move on to the Al Jazeera.
Yeah, well, Bernard is well known, political activist, very active in whatever he believes is necessary for the development of the country. His trails, the national trail, it is time that we recognize. You see, we have a way in Dominica where we do not recognize people for what they do. But the national trail concept, the idea, the vision came from Bernard Wiltshire. And he should be given credit for it.
Okay. So in recent times, and you'll hear and see, you will explain, and we can explain or just do it in person. In the documentary, talks about your take on exactly what happened, how you experienced Al Jazeera, and your thoughts on that, and of course, culmination of a person who plotted and assisted in plotting this attack, a vicious attack on you and your personal life and family life. So we'll play it for you because it answers almost most of your questions, and we'll get to talk a little bit about it.
Sometimes, as recent as 2019, you made global headlines on one of the popular news outlets called Al Jazeera. And we just wanted to understand a little more in depth what actually transpired, because it left the public wanting to know more. Can you just share with us what actually happened from what we saw transpiring on the Al Jazeera series?
I'm smiling because, Al Jazeera for me was a moment of reflection. I lost friends. I lost family. Because there were persons who were either freedom, labor, or UWP, the political parties of Dominica. And what came out of the Jazeera story was confusing. At first they thought like, OJ is talking on behalf of Skerry. Then later on he's talking on behalf of Lincoln. And of course Skerry and freedom was the same thing. The majority of his persons of influence come from the Freedom Party. And so I am considered to be somebody who is confusing. Now, what was unknown was the fact that I am a consultant. I'm a lobbyist. And among other things that I do is I work with governments throughout the region. I worked with the government of Antigua, where I introduced what do you call it, a hospitality training school. I worked with the government of St. Lucia on maritime affairs. I worked with the government of St. Vincent, similarly. I've been on television programs with Sobota Caesar. I believe he has made a statement during my recognition of my 80th birthday. And I worked with those persons. And I'm known to be someone, I'm also very closely associated with the OCS. I actually was a spokesperson in recent times. I'm talking about just about 3-4 years ago. I became an island on behalf of the FAO, who paid for my trip and everything else. And I was communicating at a level where I was a major speaker at a conference of CARICOM and OCS ministers. I did the same thing in St. Lucia. I also represented Dominica, as it were, at the independence. So I was known to be a personality within the region. And so my dear friend Leo Ford, who I have been associated with for 10 years, we've been working on, for example, right now where we have the 101 hotel. Leo Ford, and through me, had worked out a situation where we purchased the Monaco land to do a 5-star development program, fractional ownership program. And we didn't get the support from the government because at that time, the minister, Nassif and so forth came against it. I'm giving this as a backdrop to show that I've been working with that Leo Ford for 10 years, 12 years. I was in and out of Venezuela doing projects with him, as well as the Virgin Islands and all the places. And so he called upon me one day and said, listen, there's a very important person who is seeking to do some business in Dominica. And I agreed, well, as usual, to meet with that person. And the indicators were, after doing due research and due diligence, that this man was at the highest level. He was a man with extreme capacities, even to the extent that he was an ambassador to the Holy See in Rome. And then he contacted me through his agent, and we met. And which, as usual,
that's where we started meeting.
Right. As usual, I meet with Leo Ford constantly, regularly, as his consultant and his lobbyist. He wanted to do business in different islands, particularly in Dominica. I introduced him to Dominica. So when he called me to meet with this gentleman, we spoke. And the bottom lines were that the man wanted to find a way to become some ambassador in order to qualify to get investors to come to Dominica. I said, well, that's normal. That's usually, if you can make a contribution to the political parties of Dominica. And mark you, we are now talking today in Dominica's present climate. We're now talking about the rights of the opportunities to be given equally to both parties. And I figure an amount of money was quoted by some consultant, so on, that equates to millions of dollars to assist the political parties for competing elections. And when I did meet the man, it was just a short time before an election was due. And I suggested to him that what he should do is to contribute to the political machinery for their incoming politics. When the elections were called, and they would have some means by which they could get some funding. And if he could do that equally to both sides, one must win. And that was my position to him.
As a business consultant.
And he said it from me was what was the costs involved. I did quote a very small figure of $400,000 US dollars, $1 million per party. So if you're serious, you must make a contribution. They look at your CV, you go through the due diligence, you respect not one of those characters that come in like fly by night, you know, talking about a man with tremendous quality and qualification.
Who would be possibly willing?
That would have been a great ambassador because he has the history of being such. And I guess in the program that you're presenting, you will see some more details of this particular person I'm talking about. I'm so satisfied I'm talking to the real person who means well, who wants to get a position in order to qualify to get other investors to come into Dominica. And the Seraphin, and Antigua, and the St. Vincent, not just one. I have a letter which you will have available to you, which you will put into the program that you're doing, where he was seeking to be introduced and give me a letter informing the Prime Minister of Dominica and Antigua and so forth that he would like to meet with them to discuss a strategy towards the development.
So some monies were quoted, you were
The funds that were quoted was very simple. I sent $50,000, right? No. I understand as a consultant for those charges of $600,000.
Yes, I believe that's
it. So my $50,000 pays insignificant. But it was only for the cost of travel. You want me to go and do your work for you, to go to all the prime ministers. I have to have car rentals, I have to have houses to stay, hotels to stay at. I have to have meals to eat, I have to have entertainment, I have to have all the travel expenses, inestimable commitments. And I quote you $50,000 for that job. That is small change compared to what other consultants would charge. And so as a result of that, I did suggest, I think, $25,000 or $30,000 that was to pay an attorney. At that time, David Bruni was my attorney, doing my business for me, with my hotel business and government. And without talking to David Bruni, I told them that I could get them a good attorney who could have them, you know, as someone that they could rely on, who could give them the direction to take on certain business matters to do with companies to be established or whatever they have to do. And I suggested a figure of approximately $40,000, which is just small change compared to what lawyers are asking for.
Understood.
So in effect, I was working within the parameters of small quantities of quantum of funds.
And what is normal?
And then, which is very normal in my business. That's the kind of business I do, and I've been doing for years. And probably
just happened to be.
And I happen to have met this person who turned out to be a crook. Crook meaning that was just somebody who really wanted to get to the prime ministers. And hopefully the prime ministers would have met with this circle, whatever his name is, which I'll be giving you the documents on him. And this person would have met with the prime minister independent of me. And they would have recorded whatever they had with the prime minister, set up the prime minister, and then with that case, would have then have had something to go with on the international forum. But having failed in me not pushing forward too much, because I had no relationship then at a strong level with Skerrit as far as those things are concerned. My relationship with Skerrit was business. He owed Flower Gardens a certain consideration for the demolition of our hotel. And I speak to him on those levels. On a political level, since 2000, nobody has spoken to me about being involved in the politics. In fact, Rosie Douglas and I had a relationship. But when he died, my relationship with him died. Nobody from the United Works Party has ever approached me to represent them or be part of them. So I had no reason whatsoever to act on their behalf as if I had an association. I acted purely as an independent consultant and a lobbyist.
And unfortunately, we also understood this person who has set you up, you mentioned.
Well, interesting. You know, life is very interesting. Because Leo Ford and I had a 10-year, 12-year relationship. We worked together. I traveled on private, he had his private aircraft. I traveled between here and St. Thomas, and and Dominica and other, and Venezuela with him on constant basis. I got the lands purchased from government under a company called Vistas, of which I was a director. So this is my friend. He had a house at Mount Daniel, I stayed there. He had a high-end vehicle that was also available to me. He had a boat, which was a very high-class boat, which when we decided we don't do business in Dominican anymore, he sold to Suki. So I mean, you know, so you're talking about what was supposed to be.
Right.
So when we talk about Seraphin, whether he was getting other ambassadors purchased or whatever the case may be, that's just small talk among friends. So when this gentleman, and everything that I said, if anybody came on the tape, was no lie on anyone. I was purely talking to my friend. And when I realized I get stabbed in the back, I was obviously hurt and disappointed.
You're right.
And that to draw where I became the people rankers against me through Dominica. Everybody figured out those who are labor felt I cooked them with ideology, don't realize that I'm an independent person. I'm a senior statesman, a former prime minister of the country. I don't want anybody kind of play games with anybody. So wanting to be, I want to be supporter. I don't have that. I don't need that. And so my family suffered, you know, they were told things and so on. But then the afford. That happened in November, I think it was.
November, December.
December, actually early December of 2019. And I promised Leo Ford that I would bring this man to the court. Because he had what you call an NCA, an agreement, non-disclosure agreement with me, which both of us signed. I have a non-disclosure with him that I can't tell anybody what his business. He had a non-disclosure agreement with me that he can't tell anybody of my business. That's our joint agreement. And he broke it. And I advised him not to go to court with him on the basis of that. And that was in December. In January, I'm getting a call from his lawyer. I was thinking that had to do with that case that I was bringing against Leo Ford. And he says, oh, by the way, I have bad news for you. Leo Ford has just died. What do you call that, karma?
Karma. So of course your political career is only a snapshot of your...
So we will pause here, and what I have in my hand is a letter from Sir Carl McLean and all the credentials, of course, informing the Prime Minister of Dominica that he would like you to act on his behalf to pursue and represent his interests, which is an officially sealed and stamped. So this seemed official, proved official. Thank you for sharing that as well. Seemed official, proved official, and this is his information as well on all his credentials, CV of Sir Carl. And so this was basically almost, in your opinion, would you say this was like a sting operation set up? And can you share with the public what your insight after you looked at everything, reviewed everything? What is your conclusion on the agenda with?
First of all, my conclusion is there are two aspects to it. One is who's receiving the information. And I recall talking to one of my sons about it, and he was saying, but wait, there's a psychology involved in a bubble where persons receive information because of their mindset. So the mindset is that I should be either Skerritt, Linton, one or the other. I can't be Dominica. I cannot be me, just doing business and talking to someone along business lines, and you want to get introduced. I did my due diligence, and I found out that this man is an absolutely positive person to be an ambassador. In America, in England, in France, wherever you go, persons who wish to be ambassadors contribute to the political machinery. And so my advice to my client was simply this. Whatever you want to do, I'm not here representing any political party, and you want to make yourself visible, make a contribution to the political party, both political parties. One will win, and eventually you'll have a chance to sit with them. You will declare what your credentials are, and they will take a decision accordingly. And that was, as far as I'm concerned, was my outreach. When I look back at Dominica, I see people being paid ambassadorship, not ambassadorship, but consultancy fees to the point of $500,000-$600,000. We know that, we heard that recently, didn't we? Yes. And so you also had a situation where persons have very good liberal relationships with government. really represent government overseas, that if CBIs and things of that sort. That is a kind of a business situation that obtains. Mine was a business situation equally. I was dealing with a client who was my client for many years, and he says, I have somebody to meet, and I said, okay, send me his credentials. I read the credentials, I checked it, I went online and I saw the man is great. But guess what? Al Jazeera chose him, that man, to be the appointment because of how good he was. Because the expectation is that if he was that good, then any prime minister would want to sit and talk to him. And let me share something which I've never shared before. I actually went to see the Prime Minister of Antigua on this particular matter. When the Prime Minister of Antigua read, because I received VIP treatment in Antigua, which I don't even receive in Dominica. I can go for VIP lounge and so on in Antigua. In fact, I have a client who came in not so long ago, and he was met at the airport and brought in, his bags are cleared, and all the VIP treatment was given to him in Antigua. So I saw the Prime Minister there, and he read the CV. And he says, I suspect that this man with that CV is looking for some position. However, I am not prepared to deal with him at this time, but I could accommodate a discussion with him to find out what he can do for my country. So it is clear that what I was doing really was to just represent someone merely from the point of view from a business standpoint, not a political standpoint, because I had no representation for any of the two political leaders of Dominica.
Okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up. I know if we have lingering questions on that, we will answer that shortly. We'll keep moving on and continue looking at the political career. So we know that your life, we heard a lot about your political life. However, there are also many other aspects of your life. So you're a family man, you're a career man. We heard about insurance agency, you being an insurance agent. Later on in the documentary, we'll hear about a little bit of mining. We did lands and agriculture reform. We spoke about that. We also heard about the airline, which we can touch on a little later. But we just want to touch a little bit on you becoming a hotelier, because at one point, when we did not get back into Parliament in the 1980 election, at one point a decision was made for you to enter the private sector, and you became, along with your wife, a hotelier. We'll talk a little bit about that, you'll see that play, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Because you did many other things, and you have had many other experiences, one of which you're actually a hotelier, and of course, a family man. And so we'd like to talk a little bit about that and your journey on becoming a hotelier, and a little bit about your family.
Good. Greetings, Mr. Seraphin. That is the former part. But for the more fraternal, loving, family part, greetings, OJ. It is a privilege to join the other well-wishers of your life. To not only wish you, but to praise and thank God for continued grace and light on the celebration of your 80th birthday, and for your sincere contribution to family and country. Let me first highlight this one area that I think the history books have taken for granted, but still have the time to correct. It is of your leadership as Prime Minister in solving and bringing peace to the country after the uprising of the late 1970s, and for the outstanding manner in which you led the country in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane David in 1979. I take this opportunity to thank you for your service. Most recently, I've had the further privilege to interact with you on some projects and programs in my capacity as Secretary of the Cabinet, and earlier as Permanent Secretary for Foreign Affairs and Trade, and as Maritime Representative on matters of shipping, among others. Through all of this, one thing always stood out: your true character, which I could only describe in this way: a blend of youthfulness, intelligence, and wisdom, dispensed always with a loving respect and calmness. This may be the reason why today you have transcended time and is able to dazzle all with a physique and profile that looks more like 50, regardless of what is written on your birth certificate. I wish to thank your family for making your service to us possible. Special thanks to your wife, who always present this divine peace and power when she enters the room.
All right, and if we could just keep playing, Tasha, and we will, right where you were.
That's a very interesting question. It demonstrates for me what it takes to evolve, to grow. And so, first of all, I departed from the political life on the basis of the fact that my family grew very rapidly. Joining me was my wife, Lily, who I met as a teenager. She was Dominican's first junior carnival queen. And interestingly enough, at a very early age of 17, I think it was, she joined the Kibble Wallace family and went on to get a period of education at Wildy, Barbados, where she became the Caribbean first FedEx operator. And we remained together now for, it's going on 45 years since we are married, and 50 years since we met. A happy life it has been, with 5 children, and of course very challenging moments from the politics into the business world. We recall very distinctly having left government and moving into the countryside for the reason being simply this, that we found ourselves harassed by the political processes of the city of Roseau. In fact, we had what could be called a mini police station right opposite our house in Greens Lane. Was bachelor's quarters there of some police officers who were living there. And every movement that I made, every vehicle that I drove was followed. And it became a little bit over the top, so we chose to go to the countryside. And even there, in the countryside, the police officers were walking around into the surroundings of the house at late hours. My wife had the temerity to confront the police chief of the north, the sergeant, and inform him that his men have been harassing us. And so it was a very difficult moment. In fact, and in truth, because of the burden of carrying a reputation of having made money in government and so on, there's a lot of hostilities and so forth that was set at us. But we stand up from the beginning, from scratch. The situation for us was simply this, that we had to find a way to make a living. And our children came one after the other. We ended up with 5 of them. And at that point, we had to find ways and means to take care of those children. And so we built a bakery. And from that bakery, we had to get wood from the forest and all of that. And then we decided to use this opportunity to sell to the neighboring villages for the bakery, and also my wife ended up producing cakes which we sold to supermarkets. And it was a difficult period of our life. And then we created the Flower Gardens. Started off from the beginning. And can you recall how it started?
Yes. Well, actually, Floral Gardens was built in the village of Concord. And after having left Rosa, as my husband said, it was very difficult for us at that time, now that he was out of politics, and we had to find something to do. Either we would have to leave Dominica, or we would remain in Dominica and to take care of our kids. So we decided that we were going into baking. We went into baking, and it was very profitable. We baked about 5 bags of flour a day. And I went into cake making at Christmas time. I would do cakes, Christmas cakes, black cake, fruit cake, and all of that. I never baked before, but I found myself doing that. Actually, when we moved to Concord, it was just a small house there, and it was an abandoned estate. And we had...
Belonged to your father,
which belonged to my dad, yeah. And we worked the land, and we cleared it up and put in the plants every day. I would plant some new flowers, and started getting really beautiful, and folks started stopping by, especially visitors. And they would ask if, I had anything to sell. And I realized that I could make some money there. So we decided to build a small hotel, and it became very popular. And we employed quite a lot of young people from Cassibus right through the territory down to up to as far as Kalimishi. And so we trained quite a lot of people. Our waitresses were very, very elegant, well dressed, and served very well. And we hosted quite a lot of folks. We had weddings, conferences. We did a lot of group persons coming from the French islands. Then we did the tours, doing the Caribbean territory. They would come in for lunch. And we found out the cruise ships. We were the first hotel who did lunches on land for a very long time. And we became very, very popular and very busy. And one of the most beautiful part of Floral Gardens, that's why it's called Floral Gardens, is the abundance of flowers that we had, that I had plenty personally, because I had quite a lot of time besides taking care of my 5 children.
You had a mini zoo as well, didn't you?
Yes, we did have a mini zoo. We had different animals and birds and stuff like that. And it was quite entertaining for our guests, especially the folks who came on the cruise ships. It was
fountains, of course.
Yes, well, I built the fountains together with a friend of mine, and that was like a hobby to me, where we carried the stones from the river, and we built the fountains. We had about like 4 or 5 in the garden, and yeah, it was quite entertaining for the folks who visited.
Yeah, of course, we had very eminent guests, people like Buzz Aldrin, who went up to the moon. He spent a couple nights by us, and of course was very happy with the service that he got. And there was...
we also received quite a lot of awards, though.
Oh, yes. First of all, our first award, interestingly enough, came from the government of Eugenia Charles.
Yes, indeed.
It was an award for like a nature island paradise. And so we did receive awards from international agencies, and Floral Gardens was in fact very, very successful.
All right, so we got to hear about how you transitioned from political life to baking into the hotel business, and of course so many other industries that you were able to participate and contribute as part of your contribution to Dominican and to the income of so many families. Can you just summarize for us, and we want to really take some questions from the audience, if you want to summarize for us, what really is, after making all these contributions in all these industries, we have not touched on mining, aviation, shipping, plus so much more, fisheries as well, but what would be your last advice and words and sentiments to the Dominican population as to how can we cultivate that type of industry, that type of energy and tourism? I know you shared in the documentary about the youth, and you spoke about the hotel and holistic tourism and village tourism. Can you just share some final thoughts, and we open up the floor, and then we'll be serving some refreshments?
Yeah, I will just, because it's getting late, I wouldn't want to expand. I believe we
someone said that if you have lived for 80 years, oh my goodness, if you have to start speaking about what you did, it will take a couple of days. So,
Yes.
I mean, we're trying to get it into a couple of hours, or at least an hour or thereabout. Let me just say this quite bluntly. I'm very pleased that you, my daughter, with your MBA and all the number of certifications you have, operating at the highest level of Ritz-Carlton. My daughter is the senior sales manager and also a person with a degree as well. And you've come down when you're staying at Kempinski or whatever they call it now, Intercontinental.
Yes.
Intercontinental and so on. And the observation, one of my sons came from Florida, and he's staying at one of the 5-star hotels at in the Valley area. And the observations were that you're there, but we are the guests, you know, very few guests and so on. But however, this service is great, the ambience is great and so on. But if I would have had to reverse the idea, what I would have done if it was me that was in government, I would have said, hey, let us have this small hoteliers, you know. There's so many of them that have suffered as a result of the hurricanes, and that their properties are now being sold by 8 Bank, and 8 Bank has a whole number of them that the whole portfolio is on. To me, it would seem not too late, I don't think it's too late, that we start thinking of the CBI program for the indigenous hoteliers with the small establishments, so that instead of $300 US a night that you pay, that they'd pay their little $40, $50 US a night from Guadeloupe, Martinique, St. Lucia, Antigua, etc., and fill up the rooms. But I had a very nice experience, though, at Kempinski when I happened to be your guest when I came in and we had dinner, and the place was filled with black folks. And quite reverse, there was a white guy serving us, you know. I found that very interesting. However, this is how it is. And so the question for me basically is, with all the money that can be made available, the indigenous people really should be doing this. For example, if I were to get back into business, what do I do, you know? How do I qualify to get a CBI thing, as would probably so many other small hoteliers. And the 8 Bank itself, I believe, instead of looking at selling people's properties, why don't they arrive at an arrangement with the government, you know, in order to get the money to take care of business, to research the very vibrant community hotel industry that was there a few years ago. In almost every part of Dominica was a small inn, small eco-inn or whatever. And these are virtually disappearing. And so if you're not as blessed as you are, you come to Dominica, you certainly would have some difficulty in getting a nice inn, like what you'd call a boutique hotel, you know. And so this is what Dominica is, you know. We are the eco-friendly nation of the Caribbean. And our people are very generous in their time and so on. And so many nice places in Dominica, including Concord, where we come from, the river and all of that, and so many other parts of Dominica where small hotels could function very nicely if they were given the ability to receive the fund. Maybe some kind of structure of government that could establish, you know, if they could, some management, same with, you know, the question as to advertising, promotion, and also management, and, you know, under the auspices of an agency to ensure that people who get the money can use it wisely. You know, some thoughts like that, I think, is what came to my mind as you asked me the question.
Well, thank you. We continue to celebrate you, your friends and your family and your loved ones. Continue to celebrate this milestone achievement. We appreciate all of you who came out to listen. We will pass it on to Shari Seraphin to do the closing remarks. And if we have Sister Nats in the audience, we'll have a poem. But any questions for Mr. Seraphin relating to his life, his history, his legacy, any lingering questions you may have? Yes, we have a question from the audience.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Julie Roberts.
Yeah.
Happy birthday and congratulations on your wedding anniversary. Okay, so we've heard of your career, your remarkable career. We've heard of your accomplishments. However, my simple question is, how would you like to be remembered?
That's a good question. I think the answer to that would come from a lady that my wife went to do her hair by. She's from the Paybush area. And she said to my wife, this man, this is my OJ. And she claimed it, that this is her OJ. And so my wife was I was there, I'm curious as to why you say that. He said, because I was a peasant working the fields, and when I got in an encounter with Mr. Seraphin, he treated me as if I was very important. I think Natasha also had a story similarly when she made a comment during that she had that experience of me treating the man on the street down there as if he was a God-ordained person up there. And so what I want to be remembered, I don't want to, but I'll tell you this. I am to say to you how grateful I am to the Dominicans I meet, all walks of life within the islands and within my travels, and somehow they recognize me. I have a cap on, my shades on, and I think that I would look different from what I used to look like, as you see in the video presentation, and they all say the same thing, that I am personable, that I like people, and that's what I want people to remember me as, someone who loves people and do not have anything about being bigger than anyone else. I'm just a child of God.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We have another question or comment from the floor from Natasha Henderson.
Yes, just to confirm on what you were saying, I did have the opportunity to travel with you to France, we've been to Germany, to Italy, throughout our work with the tourism for Dominica, promoting Dominica. And one of the things that I have observed, and I have tried to pass on to my children, is the attitude I've seen with you, that the common man that we meet on the road, to the ambassadors, the royal family of Spain that we have had the opportunity to sit with, I noticed that you have had the same attitude with everyone, the same eye contact, the same high handshake, whatever the level of society, that's the person you are. I just wanted to say that, yes. And you will be remembered for that.
I hope it answers your question.
Perfectly so. Thank you, Ms. Natasha. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Yes, we have Mr. right next to you in the burgundy shirt. Oh, you have a question? Okay, go ahead, sir. In the green shirt.
I'd like to ask Mr. Seraphin that most of the young people, after they finish school, they graduate from high school, then some graduate from college, but they figure that the real graduation certificate is when they leave Dominica. So for the young people that is peer pressure into living Dominica, I'm one of them who left, never came back, just but except to visit. What advice would you give to those to kind of persuade them to stay, if there is any, if you could find any, because I feel that the young people are being pressured to leave, migrate. So for the few that wants to stay, what advice would you give? Because you did stay for a long time until you had enough. So you stayed for a while. So I guess you probably have some answers for that.
Okay, thank you.
That is a good question. In my time in government, serving the people, we did a lot with the cooperative movement, because we figure one person by themselves might be too weak. So the cooperative movement was a way in which we could have created an avenue. And I see where Dominica continues to have a lot of land availability. I live in St. Thomas, where the food import used to be 80% Dominica. Now it's 80% Santo Domingo. And so the question is, why don't we get that as well as agro products? We have lost Bello, that type of thing. How do we engage the young, instead of having motorcycles or scooters, why don't we give them leather to do leather craft, or cloth to become tailors, or things of that sort. In other words, I think the focus must be to engage the youth into meaningful activity through whatever resources that the state has.
Thank you for your answer. We had a question, gentlemen.
Seeing that, economically speaking, there are three major sections in our life: food, clothing, and shelter. And I'm so happy that you talk about clothing, because when I think about shelter, I don't think they give you enough kudos for what happened during David. And a lot of people don't talk about Frederick, because immediately after David, 2 days after, Frederick came and just filled up the whole airport with just so much water. But the thing that I think that you don't do, because, I remember you calling me up and telling me, I want you to do something. I want you to take, yeah, you said, I want you to do the housing for me, because I don't like the way that the food is moving on. So I said, something I'm going to do. I believe I'm an honest man, and I'm going to do it honestly. So I gave him a plan, and he accepted the plan to go by village by village, city by city, streets by street, house by house, and do not do it on our own, so that it just says, OJ people doing it. Send people to go there and check every house, and as the individual, and look and see what they need. If they need 5 galvanized, give them 5 galvanized. If they need wood, give them everything they need. And we did it that way. And the reason why I'm stressing it, because after we lost the election, they went to the housing department and they sent in 2 gentlemen to check out and see what was done. Because they wanted to use it in order to send us to jail if it wasn't done properly. But being a research scientist and an accountant also, I decided to do it the right way. And I spoke with the Prime Minister there. And we said, let's do it that way. So when they came and they checked the books and everything was in order, every house was checked, every galvanized, every mill, and not only that, whosoever came and picked it up, if they came there in a truck, they'd have to sign what they're taking and where they're taking it. And when they checked it out, the only thing they could say, you guys did a damn good job. So I thank God for that, and I thank God for the opportunity you gave me to work with you. A lot of people look at their lab, they don't know how much we put into their lab. They don't know how much time we spend every night. Sometimes 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, we stay talking about getting Dominican back together instead of just putting it. And I just wanted to take this opportunity, because one of the things I would say here, finally, is that you are a transformer.
Yes.
You transform this nation. Without you here at that time, I don't know what would happen to us. So I thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, your patience, and like the lady said before, you have the same smile. You have the same calmness. You walk the same. I watched your dance last night. I said, man, that's the same old OG. But I just want to tell you, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate your wife, because I know, and I said last time, she's a heavenly sandpaper, but I didn't break it down enough. Heavenly sandpaper means that the rough edges in the husband's life, the wife can sand it up and get it to be smooth. And I thank you for doing such a good job with my best wife. She's my best friend. I always say that the best friend I have in the world is OJ.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you also.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. And now we'll have Miss Sister Nats, who's also in the audience, a social activist. Sister Nats, would you like to join us with your poem? Yes, you can come on down, Sister Nats, while we take one last comment from the audience as well. Go ahead, ma'am. No, Sister Nats is coming up, but you could stand. You could go ahead with your question.
I don't have a question.
Oh, your
I have
comment.
a statement.
Okay, go ahead.
Concerning what this young man said, with the young people living in the country.
Yes.
Because they find they have nothing to do and they don't get encouragement. You know, so because of that, they go somewhere and some of the people overseas tell them that things are heaven in countries wherever they are. So they follow the people. Until you reach, then you see it is not the same. You know? And one of the things that I did many years ago, I heard the cries of the young people starting their business, or start their business, and me being a successful business person, I decided I'm going to have a meeting with the young people. And I got many young people to come to my business place, and I talked to them concerning what would you like to do for the future.
Okay.
And some want to have a business or doing the same thing that I'm doing, or they want to sell objects, whatever they get, and sell it by the marketplace and whatnot. And I had this meeting with them and told them about how to be successful. If your idea is, I want to make it like this, like my angel and my queen lady said, she became successful because she used her discretion. She used the vision that she had. She used the insight to build what she wanted to be successful with. And I find we, the elderly, should encourage the young people to have that wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and insight, and go forward with what you have. What is it you would like to do? You tell me, and I encourage you.
Yes.
And many of these young people are successfully doing the marketplace right now. You meet a lot of young people with different things selling by the market, all by the road. And one day when they were successful in that,
so
they
what am I going
into the first meeting they had at the post office. They called me, they wanted me to be there at that meeting. And I was very pleased to see that each and every one of them today are successful in their business. So what we, the elderly, should do, encourage the young people. If they have an idea, help them with it. You know, and go for it.
Thank you so much for your comments. And we'll turn it over to the social activist, Sister Natalie, with your poem, and we end with our closing statements.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Yes, I can tell by the clock that by now some of us are starting to, get the fatigue feeling. But I am standing here tonight to sort of see how we can bring into focus the legacy and the achievement of our beloved brother, OJ. I'm seeing that his achievements, it has come out of a background. It's not just something that just happened, right? I'm saying that to say that social science tells us that the individual is a product by the school, by the community, that's exactly what the individual will become, right? And I say this with regard to OJ, because OJ did not fall from the sky, you know, or he did not fall from a breadfruit tree, as we sometimes say in Dominica. OJ came from a particular era. The man that we have just been recapturing his entire life journey, his entire life history, all of that is couched in a particular era in the history of this country that we call the old school. You know, and I thought it was so important as we wrap it all up to actually draw our attention to emphasize that factor. Why? Because we live in an age, we live in an era, it's called the new age, right? Or let's say the new school, right? Now, when you compare the species of human beings that was produced by the old school and the species that is now being produced by the new school, you will notice that the two species are completely and vastly different. They are like diametrically opposed, right? So I want to highlight OJ in the context of the social environment that nurtured him, that groomed him, the role that they played in the days of the old school. You know, and the old school, just a sneak peek at the old school, because I know that persons are tired and we want to go home. But a sneak peek of the old school goes something like this. You see, there was a time in the period of our history when the eyes of the nation was focused and preoccupied with investing quality time into the development of the human person, right? And what's that time? That's what people say old school, and they do not take time to break it down. But old school was probably the best thing that ever happened to us in the history of this country. You know, and I am not saying this to say that sin had disappeared. I'm not saying that to say that there were no imperfections. What I'm saying is that collectively, during that era, the entire community focused attention on creating an enabling environment for good standards and good values to bloom and flourish. And that enabling environment is what I want to very quickly, you know, I'd like for all of us to focus on tonight. Because we are all familiar with the old saying, it takes. Can you finish this? It takes. Thank you. Right. And there's another familiar one that says, show me where you grew up, I will tell you your name. So, show me where you grew up, OJ, and I will certainly tell you your name. So, basically, I just wanted to very quickly make a comparison with the way we lived back then and the way, because right now we live in a world where everything is driven by technology. And if you look very closely, and if you connect the dots, you will notice that we have evolved into a species of human beings that are surrounded by a lot of stuff around us. There's a lot of, you know, like a lot of gadgets, a lot of devices, a lot of paraphernalia, infrastructure, and we have a lot of that going on right now. A lot. But when we look at the quality of the species of human beings that we have produced right now, I sometimes ask myself, will we be able to gather here 50 years from now and honor, you know, and celebrate with those who are here with us right now, you know, within the youth sector? going forward. And I asked myself, because I want to share very quickly an episode that I witnessed on the sidewalk outside of HA2 Church. All right? Okay. So there were 3 uniformed students standing on the sidewalk, and they were giggling and they were eagerly, whatever they were viewing on the phone, it was really exciting and whatever. Okay. So they were standing next to the garbage bin. The garbage bin just at the front of the church. So they were standing there and they were, getting all hyped up, whatever they were looking at the phone. It didn't seem, it seemed to have been something snotty from the language that was coming. For the snack, and they took out a drink and they took out some food. The drink, immediately when I saw the drink, from my background in food science, I knew that there were 21 chemicals in that drink. So I know that what they were drinking was poison, right? Then they pulled out the food pan, and I knew again from my background in food science that, okay, here we go, the hormones, antibiotics, steroids, blah, blah. All the wrong things that you want to put into a young adult. Okay, so purely, what they were eating, I knew from a scientific point of view, was garbage, right? They were standing next to the garbage bin, they were eating garbage. They were looking at the garbage on the cell food, right? And the language that was coming out of their mouth, oh my God. I mean, I don't even want to repeat. So that scenario went on, and if you think that was the worst I saw, so they were caught up in the phone and they were eating at the same time, and they finished eating, and they were standing next to the garbage bin, right next to the garbage bin. But then they were on one side of the garbage bin, and on the other side of the garbage bin, there was, this beautification flower pots that they put in the CD some time ago. Part of the beautification program, it's huge flower pots. So right next to the garbage bin, there was this huge flower pot, and there was some periwinkles, the blue and the red, the purplish and white, beautiful foliage, lovely flower. And that was just a shocker for me. So they're on the phone and the language thing, and they're eating the junk, and they finished eating, and guess what? They dumped all the garbage in the flower pot. The garbage bin was right there, the flower pot, but they were so preoccupied, they were in a state of mindlessness, right? And they dumped it, and I'm like, oh, and some of the garbage fell on the sidewalk, and then they just dashed away. I didn't even have time to say, hey, please, And so I stood and watched them walk away. They looked so carefree and so gay. No sense of honor, no dismay. Just did not know what to say. So silently, I began to pray. Oh my God, this is not okay. This is a sign of human decay. They left the place in disarray. Civic pride has blown away. And please believe me when I say, a part of me died on that day. There has to be a better way. So friends, please say a prayer each day. Now all of that is to say that, well, back in the days, we did not have all these amenities. This is the thing. Now what I want to highlight again before I go on is, when we look at all the accomplishments and the performance, that great performance of leadership in the hotel industry, in his political career, when we look at all of that, Do you know that, Mr. Seraphin, I want to juxtapose your level of success against all the things you did not have when you grew up. And in order to illustrate that, live for the audience, can you permit me with your cooperation to answer a few quick questions, right? Mr. Seraphin, when you grew up, in the days when you grew up, did you own a mobile phone? Did you own an iPhone? Did you? So you were not on YouTube, you didn't have a website, you were not on WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. No, you didn't. But did you own a computer and a television? Did you? In the early days when you grew up? You did not. Also, you did not have internet connection. You did not have a video chat. You did not have virtual friends. You did not have that long contact list. Did you? Did you, Mr. Seraphin? You didn't. Right. Now, did you want a Honda CRV? You did. Did you live in a luxurious home with expensive furniture, well-kept lawns and hedges, and a big bull in the doghouse? Did you, Mr. Seraphin? Did you have Bitcoin? Did you go to Disney World when you were a little boy? Did Mount Perry and Mr. Perry take you to Disney World? I know they took you to a world. They took you to another world that made you what you are today. But I'm just asking, curiously, did they take you to Disney World? They did not. Oh, wow. So, did you wear Adidas and Nike and Lacoste in those days? Did you? So, for your brother, Mr. Perry never bought you a smartwatch? No, the smartwatch that gives you your temperature and your blood rate and your heart rate and no any of that. But what did you have? What did he have? Right? Because all these things I'm mentioning are things around, not inside of us. These are all the paraphernalia that the technology has. And we've been swept away, we've been carried away, we've been overflowed by all of it. And we keep forgetting that the most important resource is the human resource. So this is why my friend OJ is such a prime classic example of where we need to be going. If 20 years, 30 years from now, we're going to be commemorating the youth of today, right? In a similar manner. But so you did not have a game console then, like your Nintendo and your Netflix and your PlayStations and your Xbox video games, Mr. Seraphin. You know any of that? So what about the Bluetooth speaker, the thing they call the boombox? You have a boombox? Oh, please. What did you have? What did you have? So that's the question. This is what I want to highlight. Look at all the things he didn't have. But look at the legacy. Yes. Minus all of that. Look at the legacy. Let me put it in column that he was able to put down, in the nation. Right? So I hope that we're beginning to understand that. It's not always everything you have wrong. What do you have wrong? When you go down there, what do you take with you? So you never had no banking and innovation. Never nothing. So how were you able to accomplish, this level of success and accomplish? How did you do it? But because by today's standards of evaluation, you are a nobody. You are. Right? Because now you must have the smartphone. Well, that's the oxygen. I got my phone. Oh my God. I got on Facebook. I don't even want to read the good book. What? Good book? What's a good book? You know that kind of thing? You know all of this distraction. You had focus. You had a community that invested time in nurturing the human person. And for that, you are a limited edition. You are part of a fast disappearing group. And and especially after I saw that little episode outside of Wichita, and there's many other things that are going on all over the island. These are the single one-offs, This is how we live right now. And this is what the youth, this is what they're playing on. And of course, if one is a product of the environment, it simply means that we are not creating an enabling environment to produce many more of OJs and the Libnans and the, are we doing that? Are we doing that? So you don't have a big gold chain. And so what you have? A cab woman and a bicycle. No bicycle? Okay. But you used to warm your food in a microwave oven? Okay. But I think this is a very long list, and I think we're tired and we want to go home. But I think I have asked enough questions to the point, right? The point that it is not the things that surround you, it's not all the things, all the gleglen that you have around you that's going to make you stand out as a man or a woman among men and women. It is not those things. OJ's example is, the message is clear, very clear. So I thought, like, before we close, that I would try to highlight the value of the old school and to see whether we can come to a place of sober reflection and begin to really ask ourselves, so what is development? Is it infrastructure? Is it on the bridges? Is it, and young people are throwing garbage in the flowers? Excuse me? And that's not the only thing they're doing. I could go on and on and on, when it comes to the species that we have. So, yes, we've grown so much in quantity. But have we gained that much in quality? So tonight, I ask the national flag, have we moved from riches to rank? Do we really need a crystal ball? The writing is like a veil. On the mountain off, there's no nice way to put it. Or should we sugarcoat it, hide it, pop? Should we? There's no known way to duck it. We've lost our biggest wicket in exchange for a loser's ticket. And so tonight, I feel so honored to be associated with this event in order of, I think it's OJ was marked for leadership. You all know OJ, right? OJ was marked for leadership. That spirit is something that was put inside of him by the Most High. I know what I'm talking about. You know what, OJ? He always had this assertiveness, and already jab, he always being with OJ, like in our young adult years, we struck a friendship that only got better and better. And the thing about being with OJ, you always energize, and don't forget the charming and the smile and everything. But OJ and I, we had an ideological attraction. Because what happened is, we were the young radicals of the age, and remember, we didn't have, you hear all what he didn't have, right? You hear all what OJ didn't have. So, not having all of that, not having all these distractions, we were able to focus on the real things of life. We were thinkers and we were, and yes, I'm just going to wrap up. So I just want to say, let us open our eyes and look at what's happening around us, and let us ensure that we do not fall too far from the path of the old school, and at the end of the day, we end up becoming the joke of the century. Right? So, OJ, you're more.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Seraphin. I'm the daughter of Oliver J. Seraphin. And of course, this evening, I'd like to thank you on behalf of Oliver J. Seraphin, his family and friends, for coming out this evening to this special event. And of course, thank you so much for everyone that is tuned in. The media houses, we are so grateful for you for coming out. This will not be a newsworthy event if you're not here. The media houses here was the Government Info Services, Julia Roberts, Ferdinand Frampton, and Emo News. So thank you so much for coming out this evening. Organizations here, Calypso Association, National Youth Council, Dominican State College, ACE Academics, UE, Open Campus, and Girl Guides Association. So thank you so much. And then, of course, our panelists, Joanne Felix, Seraphin. Joanne is, of course, Director of Operations at one of the luxury resorts in St. Thomas. So thank you so much, Joanne, for your hard work and dedication for this event as well. And my cousin, Natasha Henderson, for going above and beyond as well. Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much, Jani Shillingford, for your wonderful rendition of the national anthem. Great job, such a beautiful voice. And Sister Nance as well for your movement. We greatly appreciate that as well. Of course, I would like to thank Natasha Henderson for going above and beyond, being an organizer, and Dominican and going above and beyond for both last evening and this evening as well. We greatly appreciate you. And lastly, the honoree of this evening, Mr. Oliver J. Seraphin. Thank you so much for sharing all those details with us. Thank you so much for being a loving father, friend, and of course what you have done for the beautiful island of Dominica. And back to Joanne Hodge. Thank you. So we would like to honor Mr. Seraphin. We say, and your family who is joining, we say, we'll give you your roses now. So we want to say in honor of you, we thank you for your service to your country. As we all stand to give your standing ovation to your success. End the recess. Love you. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Oh, we love you. Yes, we do. Oh, we love you. No matter what you do. For we know that we can find you. Hey. We'll sing even more in the recess room. Thank you all.
This was OJ Seraphin 80th birthday milestone discussion. Thank you for joining.